Good afternoon, friends. With a lot of happiness and pride, I am introducing the maiden lecture series of Res Publican Law Society. Res Publican Law Society was registered on 4th of March 2005, 15 months after it was inaugurated on 26 January 2004. Now, my president, that is the president of Res Publican Law Society, has written a book that is Institution That Shaped Modern India, Supreme Court. So he is definitely focusing on Supreme Court. Now I also have Vice President Mr. S.B. Upadhyay with me, they would be both talking on the book, and it will be a participatory talk where all the friends who are present here, they can, those who have read the book, those who have not read, because we are focusing on a topic which every advocate or every law student is familiar with, that is the basic structure doctrine. So with this, I want Mr. S.B. Upadhyay to start with the book.
Friends, let me first introduce you our speaker who is going to enlighten us on the subject, because he is the author of the book called Institution That Shaped Modern India, and he has also had a wide experience and now practice in the Supreme Court. So he has seen how the Supreme Court has evolved and how this basic structure and basic features which also have been brought into the concept of the Constitution. And I understand that all of you will actively participate in it, because it is not going to be a monologue. In fact, we want it to be a participatory discussion, because the issue of basic structure, it is a judicially enrolled concept. It was not originally found in the Constitution. It was only in the 1973 when this Kesavananda Bharati case, etc. came, that it is judicially enrolled concept. Now, I only request Mr. Panda, who is not only the author of the book, but he also has a wide and varied experience in working in the Supreme Court as a doctoral record and also Supreme Court as a senior advocate. He also had the experience of working with many seniors who at the time was also involved in the making of the law which we today know as a basic structure, a basic feature, etc. So he will give us, a very lively and vivid, interpretation and evolutions of the concept of basic structure today. So welcome Mr. Panda first, and I request him now to please enlighten us on the subject.
Yes, dear friends, I would like to share with you the background which led to the very concept of basic structure by the Supreme Court, and that was propounded in Kesavananda Bharati. About the basic structure, I must tell you what is the inherent idea. The idea comes from Professor Dietrich Conrad. He was a professor in the University of Heidelberg, and right through his career, he was always talking of an implied limitation to the power of amendment. He visited India. He was a visiting professor in Banaras Hindu University, and right from 1964 onwards, he was talking as to what is the implied limitation to the amending power of legislature, and that came from the German experience they had. They had the Germans had the experience that without amending the Weimar Constitution, the Nazi party came to power, and they were able to bring in dictatorship, Nazi dictatorship they were able to bring. So with that experience in mind, they were just, Professor Conrad was asking various questions, and he would be saying, we have to imagine of extreme situations. What will be an extreme situation? For example, he would say, suppose the constitution is amended, saying there will be states of, say, Tamil Nadu and Hindustan. Whether it is possible, or say Article 21 could be amended to the effect that a person could be deprived of his life and liberty without any due process of law. Can it be done? So these are the kind of extreme situations he was envisaging, and he was asking these questions. And it started from 1964 onwards. At different levels he started talking about it. So, and his idea was somehow resonated in Mr. M.K. Nambiar's submission before the Supreme Court in Golaknath case. In Golaknath, of course, Mr. Nambiar advanced this concept, saying that look, the amending power has got inherent limitation, and amendment by amendment means you cannot change it drastically. You cannot destroy your constitution by resorting to amending power. Okay, so that is how Mr. Nambiar was developing it in Golaknath. However, in Golaknath, the Honorable Supreme Court felt that that was not an issue to be gone into, because after all they were saying that look, the parliament doesn't have the amending power. Okay, so that, and finally when a larger bench of say 13 judges was constituted to consider the issue in Keswanand Bharti, again the idea was advanced by Mr. Palkiwala, advancing the cause of that the parliament doesn't have so much power to destroy the basic structure of the constitution. This is how in Keswanand Bharti everything came. But before that, I must tell you about Justice Mudhalkar's dissenting opinion in the case of Sajjan Singh. Sajjan Singh versus state of Rajasthan. That is also a case of 1964, 1965, one SCR, the case is reported. They are actually, again, the issue was like, including certain legislation in the 9th schedule. And though the majority in that case, they upheld the parliament's power to include certain agrarian laws in the 9th schedule, here Justice Mudhalkar came out with the idea, and I must tell you, I must give you the exact expressions Justice Mudhalkar had, and I'll just quote you. I'll read it to you so that it will be helpful for everybody. This is reported in 1965 one Supreme Court reports, page 932, and we'll come to Justice Mudhalkar's opinion, and that you will find. I'll just read it to you, and I quote here. Then again, while the Constitution as originally framed can only be interpreted by a court of law, and the validity of no provision therein can be challenged, the same cannot be said of an amendment to the Constitution. This is how Justice Mudhalkar begins. For an amendment to be treated as a part of the Constitution, it must in fact and in law have become a part of the Constitution. Whether it has become a part of the Constitution is thus a question open to judicial review. It is obvious that an amendment must comply with the requirements of the Constitution and should not transgress any of its provisions. Where therefore a challenge is made before the court on the ground that no amendment had in fact been made, or on ground that it was not a valid amendment, it will be both the duty of the court as well as be and within its power to examine the question and to pronounce upon it. This is precisely what a court is competent to do in regard to any other law, the validity of which is impugned. And then I just read another portion, which will be in another portion. It is there. It will be page 966. It says, we may also have to bear in mind the fact that ours is a written constitution. The Constituent Assembly, which was the repository of sovereignty, could well have created a sovereign parliament on the British model, but instead it enacted a written constitution, created 3 organs of state, made the Union Executive responsible to Parliament and the State Executive to the state legislatures, erected a federal structure and distributed legislative power between Parliament and the state legislature, recognized certain rights as fundamental and provided for their enforcement, prescribed forms of oath of office or affirmations which require those who subscribe to them to go through allegiance to the Constitution, and further require the members of the Union Judiciary and the higher judiciary in the state to uphold the Constitution. Now he concludes, above all, it formulated a solemn and dignified preamble which appears to be an epitome of the basic features of the Constitution. I emphasize the word here, the basic features of the Constitution. Can it not be said that these are indicia of the intention of the Constituent Assembly to give a permanency to the basic features of the Constitution? Now we come to the issue as to what is the basic structure of the Constitution. What constitutes the basic structure? Now, on that, after Keswanand Bharti, Minerva Mills, Vaman Rao, so I.R. Coelho, in all those cases, the Supreme Court had occasion to expound the idea of as to what constitutes basic structure. Now, there actually we have to first say that supremacy of the Constitution is the basic structure. Then your federal structure of the Constitution or of our system constitutes the basic structure. Then judicial review, secularism, all these things are considered basic structure. So I rest my my reply on this. Then I'll request Mr. Upadhyay to respond, and then we will proceed.
Mr. Panda, it was really very, knowledgeable to hear from you on the evolution of the concept of basic features, how it came into being and all that, and given the historical perspective also of this concept. Now, recently we have seen that in many of the judgments, many new concepts had also been added in the wide definition of basic features. Like if we go through the judgment, then we find that secularism was also added. Then the power of judicial review was also added as one of the basic features. Now, can you tell us as to whether the preamble to the Constitution, which also we can say the soul and wit of the Constitution, and they say that this talks about that socialist republic, secularism, and so many things in the Constitution, do they also constitute the concept of, or do they also fall within the basic feature concept of the Constitution or not?
Of course, the preamble would always be part of the basic structure. And right from A.K. Gopalan, I'll just take you back to A.K. Gopalan and all. See, the way Supreme Court interpreted different provisions of the Constitution, it started from A.K. Gopalan. And Justice Pajalalis was the dissenting opinion. And there was difference between the approach of the majority and the minority. The majority always tried to read different provisions of the Constitution in a disjointed manner. Like, they would say, okay, we'll read Article 14 KGB, Article 19(1), 1A, all those things. So we'll read it separately. But Justice Pajalalis, but it was right. He said, no, we have to read harmoniously different provisions of the Constitution, and we say this is how rights will emerge, will emanate from for the harmonious reading of the Constitution. And what was started by Justice Pajalalis that time in A.K. Gopalan has been upheld by the Supreme Court in all subsequent judgments, right from Maneka Gandhi and other Minerva Mills to Coelho, everywhere. Now, Supreme Court always interprets different parts of the Constitution, different provisions of the Constitution with a harmonious Constitution, and that is how new rights have emerged. New rights have emanated even though they do not find place in writing, with, for example, freedom of press, for example, rights of accused, for fair trial, free and fair trial. So many things, or imbuing human dignity to every person, a girl child, a small baby. So everything it comes out of the interpretation by the Constitution of Article 21, Article 14, Article 19. So many things, that is how it comes. And preamble is definitely, it is the indicia of our basic structure.
Now, another question that comes up in my mind is that supporting an enactment made by the Parliament is put into the ninth schedule, whether that can be challenged on the ground that though it has been brought into the ninth schedule, but it still affects the basic feature of the constitutions or not. Only because a particular enactment has been brought in the ninth schedule, will that be immune from the judicial review, the power of judicial review, or will that be immune from being challenged on the ground of basic structure or not?
Then you have to refer to IR Coelho. Okay. So we have to see that judgment, and then you will realize that by including any legislation to the ninth schedule, protection could not be given. Supreme Court does not recognize that kind of protection. They will examine each and everything, and that is how it is for the Supreme Court to decide as to whether, for example, you know that what is ninth schedule? Only legislations which are with regard to the agrarian reforms, they could be brought in. Okay. Now, after that, what the legislature did, they brought in several laws, several legislations, which had got nothing to do with the agrarian reforms. So now, question before the court was whether it was the correct exercise of legislative power or not. And Supreme Court said, no, sorry, you can't do it. So that is how, I mean, everything is open to question. Whereas in Golaknath, if you look at Golaknath, Supreme Court said, it was 11 judges bench judgment. Golaknath said that no fundamental right could be amended by the legislature, which was overturned in Keswanand Bharti and Justice H.R. Khanna. The balancing judgment, the leading judgment of Justice H.R. Khanna, it had laid down the law, and it said yes, Parliament has the amending power to amend the Constitution. However, it does not have the power to amend the basic structure of the Constitution, basic feature of the Constitution. And there Justice Khanna said the meaning of amendment itself suggests that you cannot destroy the basic structure. That is how it works.
Anyone who wants to ask any question, that's it. Can I answer? Basic structure in it was written that basic structure is not a face, it's not a body. Basic structure, what I would like to know from Mr. Ashok Panda is that how this doctrine, I say by default introduced by Justice H.R. Khanna. I have the audacity to say that. Because the judgment basically was 6:6, that is as Selvai says, it was 1:1 judgment. Then Justice H.R. Khanna came, he introduced the basic structure doctrine, and he said that you can amend the constitution provided you do not touch the basic structure. Now what basic structure is, how the whole term originated, who is the founder, is the person still alive, is it known abroad also as much as we know it in India?
As I have told you earlier, the idea of basic structure, it finds place in Justice Kundalkar's opinion, dissenting opinion in Sajjan Singh, but the idea was really popularized by Professor Conrad. He was professor of the University of Heidelberg of Germany, and it was he who actually did everything, and he became really popular. And he was basically an academic, but the work of an academic was brought in by some other professors from Madras University. And for the first time, it was Mr. M.K. Nambiar, father of our present Attorney General, who advanced the submission that basic structure cannot be amended. This is how in Golaknath is there, and this this is how the whole thing has been. And so far as what constitutes basic structure, it is still an evolving concept. And the Supreme Court from time to time has been interpreting as to what is basic structure.
Any question?
And juniors, they will put certain questions.
Please, because we are the one who leading it.
Put your question with regard to the basic structure of the constitution. Sir, hello. Declaration on party judgment is there.
इसको हटाइए ना.
Sir, he want to put one question.
Sir, is there any way by which we can change the basic structure of the constitution? Any way?
Pardon?
Sir, is there any way by which we can change or modify the basic structure, add something to it, or take away something from it?
See, first of all, what do you mean by we? If it is the legislature, whatever the legislature does, it will be subject to judicial review. Okay. What constitutes basic structure will be again gone into by the court in its jurisdiction to exercise judicial review. So always it will be an open question.
Yes, when we are talking of basic structure, also this is never, I never thought that I would be asking, but it's instant because secular is the word which was added subsequently after the preamble was written. So I would like to have your views. Like this secular word was added, was it included in basic structure or it wasn't in the basic structure? And how we now say that secular is the basic structure of our constitution?
See, if you read Keswanand Bharti, there also they talk of secularism. In Keswanand Bharti, the whole thing comes in the Vinarvad Minister. It comes. So secularism has been a part of our social fabric, of our ethos. If you go back to in our civilizational history also, I've been talking about our civilizational history quite a lot. See, maybe we did not have religions in the way we have right now. For example, now we have Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, this kind of thing. So far as our civilization is concerned, we had different beliefs, different faiths, and almost all regimes, that time the kings, the republics that they were there, they always talked of respect for others' beliefs. For example, I've been talking about King Ashoka's rockets earlier also. If you read King Ashoka's rockets, there you will find the way he approaches the idea of harmony among different faiths. And he comes out with this proposition. He said, look, I love my faith, okay, my belief, but the moment I try to glorify my faith and try to put down other people's faith or belief, then the glory of my faith also goes down. That is the kind of logic he gives. Yes. So that is how, if you look at King Ashoka, and after King Ashoka also you will find there are several things. And see how has our civilization developed. Our civilization has developed by way of pulling people inside. For example, the Parsis came. You know the story about Parsis, what happened when they came to India. I mean, they were persecuted in Iran, that time Persia, okay? So they land somewhere near Navsari or something like that in Gujarat. Both the sides did not know each other's language, they did not understand each other. And here this Parsi community comes and they will say, you give us refuge, okay? You accept us. So there will be a glass of milk or something like that. So the king will just point out to the glass of milk. The glass of milk is full. The chief will be informing the Parsi saying, we have no place. The glass is full. And the Parsi gentleman who was representing them, he will just put a very small amount of sugar into the milk. So this is how the conversation takes place. Saying, look, we'll be part of you. You don't have to bother about us. You don't have to bother about our idea. That is how people came here. People came here as conquerors. Okay. But what did they do? They simply came here and they became part of our Indian milieu, Indian civilization. That is what has happened. And that is how I think we are proud of our civilization. And whenever we talk of fundamental rights or directive principles, actually just recently I have come across an interview by our former Prime Minister Morarji Bhai Desai. So he says, look, India had democracy much before, much earlier than Europe or America had. And he refers to, we had republics, different republics that time, even when Bhagwan Buddha was there, Mahavir was there, so republics were there. There were kingdoms, there were republics. And the concept of secularism means not that, we are antagonistic towards religions, no. Secularism here means we have equal respect for all things. So that is what secularism means. Respect for one another. Like, people will say, you behave towards others the same way that you like you to be addressed by others. That is how our concept comes, and it is based on tolerance. Our secularism is based on tolerance and rationality, reasonableness, everything is there.
I welcome Mr. Manish
the last one from him. We'll have less interruption.
Because you have, before you came, we were discussing about the legalistic issue. But you have a real issue which had been of a lot of emotive value nowadays.
I'm not gone beyond constitution.
Correct. I'm not saying,
You are
but
within the
that's
parameters. This was
within-
the perimeter of constitutional
within-
laws.
within-
And the word that I am talking about was instituted much later. Baba Saheb Ambedkar never instituted this word into the preamble.
that is why I wanted to point out that if I am not wrong, June prior to 46th Amendment, 42nd Amendment, the word socialist and secular was not part of the Indian
democratic
Constitution.
also, democratic also.
How far 42nd Amendment was within
Correct.
the...
Correct. So the word socialist and secular, these words were added by 42nd Amendment. But even without amendment to this, there was Article 25 that says that there is no state protected religion. The state doesn't protect any religion. So I think the seed of the what we call the secularism was under Article 25 itself, when they say that there was state protected religion. I just want to know that if it was so, then what was the need of bringing secularism and socialism by 42nd Amendment?
See, you also know what is the compulsion behind the 42nd Amendment. Everybody knows about it. That time, in 1975, when Mrs. Gandhi was unseated by the judgment of the Allahabad High Court, at that time, Mrs. Gandhi found no other way but to bring in emergency, and which resulted in the murder of democracy in our country. That I have dealt in my book also. The way lakhs of people were arrested, people were deprived of their lives. We lost a lot of lives that time, and lakhs of people suffered like anything. So during that process, Mrs. Gandhi was also taking a kind of populist approach, saying we'll bring in all these things, secularism will bring in other things. So everybody knew that whatever she wanted to do at that point of time was to save herself. Nothing more than that. See, she was not a Democrat, number one. But at the same time, I must tell you, in 77, what is the compulsion for her to go for election? Because the term of the parliament had been extended. And Mr. Kuldeep Nair, in one of his writings, he talks about it. See, Mrs. Gandhi was very much bothered about the sense of legitimacy she will be getting from the Western world. She was very much bothered about it. So when Mr. Kuldeep Nair is asking late Sanjay Gandhi, saying, how come, why did election happen? And Sanjay Gandhi that time he said, but election was never in the agenda. We never thought of election. So it was, I mean, what Mr. Kuldeep Nair said, it was a decision which was very peculiar to Mrs. Indira Gandhi that time. So she thought that if she gets democratically elected, then her legitimacy will be accepted by the Western world. Okay. But now everybody knows that, I mean, she paid miserably. People of India, they voted against her, they ousted her. In 77, a new government came. Now, when you are talking of secularism and all those things coming into preamble, now the Janata Party, which brought in the amendment, 44th amendment, to undo whatever happened in the 42nd amendment, 44th amendment. So, in order to undo whatever was brought in 42nd amendment, but all these preambles, all these parts were retained. Therefore, it was a conscious decision at that point of time by everybody. That time Janata Party was in power. So, it was a conscious decision, and Janata Party consisted of all opposition parties, including Jansangh, which became subsequently Bharatiya Janata Party. Then they had the Socialist Party, they had Congress Organization, then Babu Jagannathan's party was also there. So everybody was there. So that time the consensus was that we must have whatever we have in terms of secularism, in terms of republic form of government, in terms of federalism, all those things are there.
Now, you want to ask something? Just one. Give me 1 minute. Mr. Manish Mohan has joined us. He is the treasurer of, not only treasurer, these posts mean nothing. He had promised he will join and he joined. Now he must have read that chapter, I'm very sure, with his diligence. So please, let us have you on basic structure doctrine. Also, if you have something to ask the author, because he is written over here, so we would like to hear Manish.
And one thing more, he being the treasurer, he has come at the right moment between the